it was effortless. It just happened the way it was supposed to happen. All I had to do was show up and be myself, and I did it, and I executed. And that's bringing us closer to like a flow state. And it is my sincere belief that when you get your mitochondria working, the power plants in your cells, that you can make yourself go into a flow state more easily. That things that were a lot of work become less work. So let's talk about some of the things that happen inside your body that turn off willpower, and we'll talk about what the Bulletproof Diet and other principles in the book can do for you, and in terms of turning that back on. The analogy that works best for me is related to the Buddha's concept of the monkey mind. And there it's this idea of a wandering mind, but I think the Labrador Retriever is maybe more apt, because Labradors are a better example, I think, for the way we behave than monkeys are. Plus Labradors don't throw their poop at you the way monkeys do, and that's never nice. So, the first thing that a Labrador will do is you throw a stick and it goes, ah! And so Labrador is always looking for an opportunity or a threat. And the cool thing is, if we took out your prefrontal cortex, the whole part of you that sort of makes you human, and we were all just big animals, you could survive with this idea of like, look for opportunities and threats. So run away from tigers, basically, and pay attention to anything that moves and is new. This is a very basic operating principle for our mind, but it tends to make us a little bit distracted, and it gets us in trouble because we don't do what we were going to do because we got distracted by something else. And one of the reasons that we get distracted by other things is the second behavior you see in a Labrador. Now, here I can probably talk about stuff that I wouldn't talk about like in New York, because we have starfish here. And a spoiled starfish is like the most disgusting thing ever, but a Labrador will happily eat a spoiled starfish even if it throws up all over your car for the next 2 days afterwards. Okay, Labradors will eat any kind of nasty spoiled food because, hey, it might be food and you might starve, so you might as well eat it, and have it hanging out of your mouth, and it's gross. Well, you're kind of the same way, because you said you weren't going to eat the bagel, and you told yourself you weren't going to eat the bagel, and the bagel sat there, and you, after a while, said, I'll just eat half of it. And then you're like, why did I just eat that bagel? And it's the same as Labrador throwing up in the back of your car, saying, why did I just eat that starfish? It doesn't know why I ate the starfish, but it did. The same way you ate the bagel. And the normal process that we have there is like, oh, I feel guilty, it's because I'm weak, it's because I didn't try hard enough. And that's totally not how it works. And we'll talk about how that works before. But that basic survival thing, wait a minute. Run away from tigers, don't starve. Hey, that's a pretty good algorithm for continuing the species, right? Like, those are good rules. So that's nice. And the third rule that also gets us in a lot of trouble that the Labrador Retriever is also really good at is, oh look, there's a leg, I think I'll go mate with it. Right? Those are all three things you have to do to continue any species, right? Make sure that there's young members of the species, eat stuff, and run away from stuff that eats you. Okay? And if you don't believe that you have these things running in your mind, it's because they hide from you. And they hide from you because it's really important that you don't get in their way, because they're there to keep you alive and keep the species alive. And it's kind of annoying, because here's the conversation that is most sapping of your willpower. And it's your body gets a signal that you don't usually pick up that says, energy is flagging. And energy can be flagging because of hunger hormones, like leptin or ghrelin, or because your blood sugar rose and fell, or for a whole host of other reasons that you get a signal that says, must eat. Now, when the body gets that signal, it normally says, I might die, because the body's dumb. It doesn't have any of your thoughts up here. And when it says, I might die, then it says, better eat. And then there's that bagel sitting in front of you, or the cookie, or that little dish of candy, whatever your particular weakness is. And there's this thing, and imagine a dog with a piece of popcorn on its nose. You ever seen? They'll sit there, and there's a popcorn on its nose, and they have this look on their face like, I really want this, but they're focusing all that effort on just maintaining control until you like snap your fingers, and then they catch the popcorn and they get all happy, and then they want to do it again. Well, your Labrador brain, if you've not eaten right, is sitting there going, eat that. And you, as a rational human being, say, I'm not going to eat that. So there's a decision loop that's set up that goes, eat that, no. Eat that, no. Eat that, no. The problem is that you only have so many no's before you run out of them, because each no is a decision. And we didn't know this 10 years ago, but there's such a thing as decision fatigue and even willpower fatigue, which says that you can make so many good decisions, and after a while you start making less decisions and making worse decisions. So much so that they did a really interesting study in Israel of prison parole boards, which are entirely unrelated to Labradors, in case you're wondering. And what they found was that if you wanted to get parole, show up at 8:20 in the morning, and you're almost guaranteed to get your parole. Why? Because the people making the decisions are fresh. And as the day goes on, if you're after 2 o'clock, you might as well just not show up, because you're not going to get the parole, because it's just too much work to make a decision. They'll just say no, like, get me out of here. So the same thing happens between you and your Labrador with the cookie. It says, eat it, you say no, and if you say no 100 times, and this can happen like once a second, at a certain point you just give up and you negotiate. So, fine, whatever, like, just half. I'll just have a little bite. And then all of a sudden, Labrador's happy for about 5 minutes, and then it gets distracted and tells you to eat some more. And pretty soon, at the end of the day, you're like, I feel like a total failure. Like, I failed because I wasn't strong enough, like, because I'm a bad person, and you feel guilty. It's not because you're guilty, not because you're weak, it's because you got pestered, and you had to make enough decisions that you couldn't do it. Along the way, you also didn't make those other decisions, like, you know, where to go for lunch, because you were already tired of making decisions, so you didn't make a great decision there. And you maybe didn't make a good career decision. Maybe you made a poor parenting decision. So your whole day, in fact, your whole life can be terribly influenced by you taking a lot of your precious human conscious resource and using it to try and will your biology into doing something, when the much easier path is to just take control of your biology by using biochemistry to say, Labrador, shut the hell up. Have some MCT oil. Now in the US, Purina, a big animal food company, just started advertising that they're putting MCT oil in dog food. And in fact, I wrote a post about this a couple of years ago, because I've been giving my dog MCT oil for a long time. My dog's name is Merlin. He's a little brown English cream dachshund. And he walks around all the time wagging his tail. Like, that's all he ever does. He doesn't even have a reason for wagging his tail. He just does it. But he doesn't pester for food like the other 6 dachshunds I've had in my life. And why? Because he actually doesn't have the food reflex. Because in your brain, in a dog's brain, you have glial cells and you have neurons. And glial cells actually like glucose. That's their preferred fuel source. It comes from eating carbs, or maybe if you're like extreme into keto and your body is good at it, you might be turning some protein into some carbs. But the neurons prefer ketones. And if they never get ketones, there's sort of that gnawing hunger that's like, can you just eat something? But when you do something like Bulletproof Coffee that gives you even relatively small amounts of ketones, whether or not there's glucose present in the body, that turns off some of these signals from the brain, and all of a sudden, it's not that you had to train the Labrador, which you can certainly do, and something that I've spent a lot of time doing through things like meditation and breathing and yoga and neurofeedback and biofeedback and all, but you can actually just like turn down that energy demand. And what comes out of that is the ability to make a lot more impactful, positive, good decisions and to have energy left at the end of the day. So this is short-circuiting something that's very hard to do nutritionally. You can get ketones in the body. You go 3 or 4 days with 0 carbohydrates or near 0 carbohydrates and moderate protein and high healthy fat, which is in the Bulletproof diet, and you can kick yourself into nutritional ketosis and be running just on fat. And funny, that's what almost every sort of historical spiritual tradition has, which is the idea that you fast for a few days, and when you do that, you go into ketosis, and then you experience a state of clarity. Well, that clarity comes from burning fat, not sugar. And what I would propose, and what I do propose in the book, is that by using brain octane oil specifically, which most quickly goes to ketones, you can get the same mental clarity that comes from an extended fast, or even from an extended ketogenic diet, in a relative short amount of time. And if you do use that to go into ketosis, you can do it and feel much fewer of the effects that come from going into ketosis. When I first started experimenting with ketosis, like more than 10 years ago, I'd get like this horrible breath, and it was really, really biologically rough to cut over. But when you're using brain octane and you're eating a lower toxin diet and not too much protein, it becomes much easier to make the transition and to swap back and forth. And that's why sort of Bulletproof Coffee, for me, is the way I start my morning. One of the other things that I've noted, I use a blood ketone meter, which lets you measure ketones directly in the blood. And if you're above 0.6, you are technically on the edge of ketosis. And one night I had sushi with lots of white rice for dinner, so I'm out of ketosis. The next morning, I have Bulletproof Coffee with brain octane in it. I actually put extra brain octane in. And I took my ketone readings at 0.2, and a half hour after I have the coffee, they're 0.8. And I'm feeling like myself again. And it's that ability to use the environment, in this case the food you put in your body, to change how your brain gets its fuel. So the parts of my brain that really wanted that fat got it, and the parts of my brain that wanted glucose probably had some left over from last night. But no one teaches you this stuff. It's not like you can just feel that, oh, I needed this versus needed that. I got the data. And the cool thing is, even if you don't have the data, the techniques generally work pretty well. And you can see, I did something and it worked, or I did something and it didn't work. And each of you is your own guinea pig, and each of you is genetically different and environmentally different, and we all have different gut flora. But the general principle is say, try this kind of stuff, but whether you need a little more of this, a little more of that, that's why there's variation, 50 to 70% fat in the diet. That's why there's a list of suspect foods. Like, you may be fine with tomatoes, they don't affect you, and you may get rheumatoid arthritis from tomatoes. But until you get this sorted out and you don't know, they should be suspect foods. And you can eliminate those suspects and say, all right, I'm going to bring these in because they work for my biology. But if you don't know that they should have been suspect foods, then you're just going to always do it, and probably 5 other suspects, and you'll never know that any of them had an impact on you. In fact, I like the analogy of Superman here. Imagine if you're Superman and you don't know that there's such a thing as kryptonite. You just know that some days I'm like bulletproof, and other days I just feel crappy, right? And then Lois Lane has a ring with kryptonite, and there's a little kryptonite in your car, and a little kryptonite over, at the gym. So you're like, well, I went on vacation, and Lois stayed home, and I'm feeling really bulletproof, and I came home, and I don't know, maybe it's her rings. You put the ring away. No, I'm still feeling crappy because you went to the gym or because you got in your car, right? So the practice of doing the bulletproof diet is, well, find the things that might make you weak. And it's really, really annoying because it's not just foods you eat. It could be the chemicals in the foods. It could be the quality of the food. It could be the type of the food. And I'll tell you guys the last food craving that I experienced. I'm building my biohacking facility in Cobble Hill. It's in the barn, and basically we're turning the barn into a place where I can do weird things that upgrade the human body, so that I can do even more good stuff. I support my meat as much as I can so that it'll support me, and then I can do nicer things. And one of the construction guys took an exterior grade nasty organic solvent thing and put it inside. And I walked in and took 3 breaths and I'm like, oh, this is nasty stuff. And I went outside, and 20 minutes later, I'm like, I want a cookie. I didn't want a cookie in so long. I don't want cookies. I curse at cookies. And so I actually had some chocolate made with real sugar instead. But I did want the glucose, and I didn't even feel bad about having the glucose because my liver was like, I would like something to oxidize and process these toxins, which is energetically burdensome. So it pulled my blood sugar down because it was urgent that the liver cleaned out these organic solvents so they didn't go into my brain and into my nervous system. So, okay, a need for energy. In fact, one of the things that I've done is I've taken Bulletproof Coffee because fat can help you get rid of toxins, and so can sugar. I put real coffee, real sugar in my Bulletproof Coffee if I'm dealing with something like that because I need to get my blood glucose up because I have an immediate demand for it. Kind of interesting, right? But that sort of thing happens. So if you're in a world like I am where I don't have food cravings, It just never happens, and if it does, it's my fault. And my fault in this case was I breathed organic solvents. But the idea is that you know there's something in your environment, and it is an unnatural state for you to just have like an unnatural craving. If you go to a restaurant and you eat what you think is safe food, and when you're done with dinner, you're like, I really want dessert. There's a reason you really want dessert if you don't normally always want dessert everywhere you go. And the reason is probably something in your food. And it's usually MSG. And it's usually MSG that the restaurant owner doesn't even know is in the food. And when you add MSG to food, it means people like it more. Which, if you're a restaurant guy, okay, that's cool. It also means that they order more drinks because it makes you thirsty, and it drops your blood sugar. So first you spike and then you drop, and when blood sugar drops at the end of the meal, what do you want? Cheesecake, right? So then you buy the cheesecake. The restaurant guy's happy and doesn't even know that he hacked your biology. He just knows that economically, this sure works well. People sure like it when I use the organic spice mix that has organic MSG in it. There is a large national natural grocers chain that has ranch dressing that contains organic MSG in it. You can take organic broccoli or any other kind of organic vegetable, you cook it with acid for a while, and then you add lye to it, which pH balances it, and that's basically textured vegetable protein, which is mostly MSG, and it's organic. So pay attention to what causes food cravings. Now I'm going to check our time here. So we've been talking for about a half hour. These are examples of things that happen to you, and I would encourage you to play around with what you do in the morning. Try Bulletproof Coffee, try it with collagen, try it without collagen. But when something happens in your brain that you don't want, it's like, oh, I'm tired. Like, I shouldn't be tired, I slept reasonably well. I didn't do anything weird, like something wasn't perfect. Just go back in time. And I've had so many clients and friends go through this with me. Like one of them's like, Dave, I'm on the Bulletproof Diet. This is the guy invented one of the major sleep monitoring systems. And he's like, I'm feeling really, really good, but then I had just an hour and a half of complete zombie at 5 o'clock, and I'm trying to figure out what happened. Like, well, why don't we go back a little bit? Tell me what you did before that. And so I was in a meeting, I said, and what did you eat before that? He said, well, I had a handful of cashews. I'm like, well, maybe you should pay attention to that. He's like, but I don't have a problem with cashews normally. I said, yeah, well, you had a problem with that handful of cashews, right? And I don't know what he was eating. I wasn't in the same room, so he might have eaten some that were roasted with bad oil. They might have had MSG on them. Or maybe they were, raw cashews that were stored in the back of someone's drawer for a year, or from a bin that wasn't well cleaned, or just from something that was processed inappropriately agriculturally. So nuts are generally suspect foods because of the oils they contain, because of anti-nutrients they contain, and particularly things like Brazil nuts that are high in selenium, but also extremely likely to be contaminated with mycotoxins. So if you eat a Brazil nut because it makes you a better person because it has selenium, then you might also be getting something that makes you not feel good. So like if the Brazil nut smells bad, like don't eat it, whether or not it has selenium. And this leads to another part that I hope you got out of the Bulletproof Diet, and it's something that I didn't call out to specifically because I wrote this book to teach people how to do it rather than all the scientific nuances. I don't want to scare away audiences. So this is a how do I make it work for me kind of book versus a scientific treatise on all the reasons that it works. But there's something called order of operations that you probably remember from about 6th grade. Let's see, in 7th grade, the acronym that I remember was, please execute my dear Aunt Sally, parentheses, exponents, multiplication, division, etc., etc. And of course, that was, a not very nice acronym. I'm sure there's a nice one, but I don't remember what it is. So make ones that work. Anyhow, order of operations for food. Number 1, does it have the right type and amount of macronutrients? So this is fat, protein, and carbs. And I love the spider venom example that you may have heard before, but if I said, hey, 30 grams of protein, you'd say, okay, and I said, eggs, spider venom. You'd be like, eggs? Any sane person would. But when you read, like, the food pyramid and they tell you to eat X amount of protein, and they equate gluten and soy protein with eggs and steak. What the hell? They don't do the same things in the body. Like, it's like fish and bicycles. They're not related. Okay? So this is something to understand. So proteins that are the right ones for you and the amount of that. So that comes first and foremost. If you get that wrong, you're hosed, especially if you're eating the wrong types of fat, you're eating a bunch of the omega-6 inflammatory stuff. It's just not going to work, and you can stop there because you've already failed. But once you get there, the next order of operations that's terribly important is anti-nutrients. And most diets just either ignore them or downplay them. And these are things like naturally occurring defense systems in food. Things like kale. Well, kale didn't evolve to eat. And if you take kale and you try and feed raw kale to a horse, most horses won't even eat it. Like, they'll smell it and be like, yuck, and they'll walk away. That's because kale evolved things to make it repellent to most animals. Although I think goats will probably eat it because they'll eat almost anything except zucchini for some reason. But it's really interesting, and so we've elevated raw kale to a certain level of religious experience. It's almost like a sacrament. But here's the thing: traditionally, all the cultures that eat kale have cooked it. And when you cook it, you can get rid of much of the oxalic acid, which is the primary defense system that kale evolved to keep bugs and fungus and bacteria and animals from eating it. Because kale's dream is always to grow up to be a parent of baby kale, not to be food on your plate. And the same thing goes with whole grains. The outer layer of the grain, yeah, it has some fiber and some B vitamins in it, but it might have some phytic acid and some other things there to keep you from eating it, because the grain didn't want to grow up to be your food. So this is just a natural evolution of things that says, well, we can live, like we can process enough of the grain, but it comes at a cost. So when you're doing your diet, macronutrients right, avoid the anti-nutrients when you can, and only after you've done that do you go in and look at the micronutrients, things like potassium, magnesium, zinc, etc., etc. One of my colleagues from the cloud computing business, where I've spent much of my career, super smart guy, honestly smarter than I am. He lives in Vancouver, and he's about 300 pounds, type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure, and we're sitting in Germany at a hotel room at a customer site, and I'm ordering my eggs and avocado kind of breakfast. Germans insist on giving you a grilled tomato with every dish. I don't know why. And I'm enjoying this, and I'm looking at this guy, and he orders 2 bananas. Okay. Type 2 diabetes, you can't control your blood sugar, and you should be eating like fat and protein because those give you stable energy. And I looked at him and I said, you're a really smart guy. And I'm not judging your food. I don't do that for people. People eat whatever they want, and I'm totally okay. If you want to eat, apple turnovers for the rest of your life, good for you. But I'm like, but you're a smart guy, and I know you think about stuff. So what was your thought process behind choosing that? And he said, I have high blood pressure and I need potassium. It was logical, but he had not been taught the order of operations, right? Because he should have been like, I don't know all that fructose and all those carbs. Those are going to do the wrong thing for my biology. So macronutrients, right type, right ratios, avoid the anti-nutrients, and then make sure you get micronutrients. And fortunately, we have this amazing technology cavemen didn't have, and it's called vitamins. And you can buy them downstairs. And it's okay to supplement your minerals, because I hate to tell you, even if you eat really, really good vegetables, unless they were grown in a really properly managed organic farm or maybe a biodynamic farm, the soils aren't even depleted. And whoever told you that spinach is high in iron, they lied. In 1950, they looked at spinach from some farm somewhere and said there's this much iron in it, but last time I checked, spinach is incapable of alchemically transmuting one metal into another. So there can only be iron in spinach if there's iron in the soil. And the same goes true for every single nutrient table you find online. They're all a lie. Because what's on your plate has nothing to do with whatever happened in the soil and in the ecosystem when they measured that food. What that means is that it's a great insurance policy to take like a multi-mineral tablet. And if you're in this room and you're not supplementing magnesium, you're probably deficient in magnesium, because we don't get access to things that contain magnesium the way we used to. So there's a great case that says for modern humans, even if we're getting the maximum nutrients we can from our food, like I do, that taking the basic minerals and a few of the basic vitamins like vitamin C can help us perform better, can help us feel better, and probably make us live longer. So that's why there's a top 10 recommendation list in the Bulletproof Diet. These are foods that benefit most people that aren't particularly controversial. Now, I want to make sure, I'm looking at our time here, that we have lots of time for Q&A, because I think that's one of the reasons that you all came here, and that we also have adequate time for book signings. So why don't I open Q&A now, and I'll just answer questions in a way that's helpful for all of us. So if you have a question, just raise your hand, and I'll call it. I used to teach at the University of California. I'm happy with questions. So.
I'm not sure if you're going to want to answer this question.
I love hard questions.
And maybe I shouldn't preface my questions with that. But in really broad strokes so that you don't give it away for people who still haven't read the book, like I haven't read the book. How does your kind of system differ from, let's say, Whole30? Like, I'm really familiar with Whole30 and I've done a bunch of them. How does it differ? How is it?
The question is, how does Bulletproof differ from Whole30? I actually don't know the Whole30. I don't know what it is. I know the general paleo rules like that, but is Whole30 a book or something? I just don't follow that.
Okay, yeah, it's a book. It's by Melissa and Dallas Hartwig.
Oh, I'm familiar with some of her work, but I haven't read Whole30.
Sure,
okay. Yeah, I've come across her stuff, but
okay.
I don't have a good framework in my head. Like, I haven't studied it enough to tell you the differences. Is it similar to what I recommend?
Well, I see a lot of similarities, so that's why I was asking what the differences are, because
What you'll find is that there's a vegan, there's like a vegan sphere over here, there's a vegetarian sphere here, there's a low carb sphere here, which is like eat all the artificial sweeteners you want. It doesn't matter what kind of protein or fat you have, as long as you don't eat carbs, it's okay. And then you get over here, and there's like there's sort of the low carb, high fat, where they realized that protein was maybe too much protein was bad, but they still eat artificial sweeteners. And then you go over here, which is like the paleo thing, which is actually kind of related to the vegan thing, because paleos and vegans care a lot about food quality together. And over here on the vegan side of things, or sorry, on the paleo side of things, you have things like the Price Pottinger Foundation sort of work, where people are looking at the historical things that we ate that affected things, the Ancestral Health Society, and sort of like paleo natural food land, and there's various perspectives on that. And if I do like a taxonomy of nutrition, Bulletproof is definitely over here on this side of the spectrum. It didn't evolve from paleo. Probably the Price Pottinger Foundation, like the Sally Fallon work, has been more influential, because a lot of my core research came from anti-aging and then fertility research, and putting that into something that was digestible for people. So I looked more at epigenetics, cognitive performance, avoiding Alzheimer's and stuff like that. And after doing that since early 2000s, I'm like, I kind of agree with a lot of the paleo stuff, but not all of it. There's excessive protein in paleo. There's meal timing things we don't agree on. There's some carb things we don't agree on. There's the xylitol question, but it's it's a body of work that there are others. In fact, I don't think I thanked Hartwig in the book, but there's many others who are in the same vein, guys like Gary Taubes, who've contributed to the science here. So it's not like this is the only thing in its part of the world, but it's in that quadrant of the map for sure.
I have kind of a two-tone question. I do your Bulletproof every morning, so thank you. I really like your products too. But I'm wondering about ketosis. So I also like a greens drink, and I'm also wondering about the collagen in it. So if you're trying to stay in ketosis to burn, I guess, if you have like a greens drink in the morning, which is kind of not good to count your carbs, but I know it has 4 grams of carbs because I wanted to know how many carbs you needed to stay out of ketosis.
The old, how many carbs does it take?
But then I also thought that if you had added protein to it as well, that was also going to take you out, and I thought that your goal to stay in ketosis in the morning. So I'm wondering what the balance is between that.
The question if you didn't hear it over here, is that, all right, I want to do a green drink in the morning, there's 4 grams of carbs in it.
I know that sounds awful, but I was just wondering.
There's nothing wrong, but it's a good question, because there's do I stay in ketosis and am I doing a bulletproof intermittent fast? And they're sort of different questions,
Yeah.
right? It's possible if you have enough fat and you have 4 grams of carbs to stay in ketosis, but it depends on who you are. Like when I weighed 300 pounds and I went on the Atkins diet, I would pee on hundreds of those damn little sticks, and I only turned like 2 of them pink because I was eating like too much steak, right? It was a protein problem, and it was hard then anyway for me to get into ketosis. So for you, the only way to really know is to pee on a stick or get like a blood ketone meter and see what it does. But I'm guessing for most people that it'd be okay. And green drinks can be a wonderful way to get vegetables. They can also be a wonderful way to get like 25 different vegetables, 3 of which are kryptonite for you, and some of which were dried inappropriately and have mold in them. So the quality of your green drink really matters, and I've had more than one client who are like, I'm getting weird brain fog, and they quit drinking their green drink, and the brain fog stops. And whether it's an allergy.
So many different things you don't know what's in it.
Yeah, and I looked at formulating some stuff, and I pay a lot of attention to these anti-nutrients because I think they're very important. And I was looking at using a maca product. So I looked at one of the highest enzymes on the planet for maca, but I ran it through my tests, and it had 13 parts per million of aflatoxin in it. So had I taken that, this is one of the really bad mold toxins, one on peanuts that we know causes liver cancer, and I could have taken that and mixed it into a green thing and never known, right? Because I wasn't mandated by law to have that test, and they were selling the stuff legally. So, and this doesn't say all maca is bad. Gelatinized maca, I think there's a good place for that as an adaptogenic herb, but quality matters. So I've found personally, like I've gotten hives from green drinks, and I don't know why. My kids have gotten hives from green drinks. So you've got to really say, all right, when I have this green drink, do I kick ass all day? If yes, that's great. But quite often I find people are using green drinks even though it might be working for them and against them. Every food has its goods and its bads, and it could be you do really well on the green drink and you don't do well on that same green drink. And it's not that the green drink is good or bad, it's that your gut flora and your body is very different. So just be careful with that. And then if you're having collagen protein, protein raises your insulin much less than sugar will. So if you want to stay in ketosis and you're having Bulletproof Coffee with napkin oil, and you put a couple scoops of collagen in there, most people will stay in ketosis or still be able to move towards ketosis there. But some people, the easiest way is just for a couple of days have nothing but Bulletproof Coffee, and at night just heat the coffee out, put some vanilla in there, and bam, like your body has no choice. And if you look in like the dark corners of the Bulletproof website, there's something called the Rapid Fat Loss Protocol that I didn't put in the book because I was afraid it would harm people. and it says at the top, like, warning, don't do this. And it's because you store pesticides and metals and other toxins in your body fat. And if you lose fat as fast as you're capable of losing it with that protocol, you will get brain fog. Like, it'll mess you up potentially for a month or 2 as you crunch through these. So I'm like, if you're gonna lose weight like this, like, eat the charcoal, take the glutathione, take vitamin C, like do everything you can to detox, get extra water, because otherwise you can make yourself ill. So it's kind of a complex question, but bottom line is, fat keeps you in ketosis. Protein in moderate amounts should be okay for most people. 4 grams of carbs is probably fine. A low carb diet is still 75 grams a day. And as long as you're not trying to do a bulletproof intermittent fast, 4 grams of carbs in the morning, as long as it's not like fructose or something, you probably don't want to do that. And 4 grams of fructose isn't going to kill you either. It's just less ideal than 4 grams of something else. Long answer.
The only book I've read of yours is the Better Baby book.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome. I couldn't resist reading it, not for me, but for my daughters-in-law. But I read the whole book, and then my husband and I started eating a lot of the ways you recommended in there because of that part. But my question was, it didn't occur that you'd addressed, don't remember you addressing seeds at all. And what your take on seeds?
Well, seeds are interesting because when you roast them, the oils get damaged, but it removes some of the phytic acid and the anti-nutrients. And so raw seeds are generally okay, but if you have a lot of them, they're going to bind to some of the minerals that could be in your body. Seed oils tend to be more on the omega-6 side of things, And this is kind of shocking, but a little bit of omega-6 oil is okay. I know about 4 people who actually avoided omega-6 oils to the point that they needed to add them back in, and I'm one of them. And so the ideal ratio from an anti-aging perspective is 4:1 for omega-6 to omega-3 in your red blood cells. Most people in here, unless you've been practicing a very healthful, high-fat diet, you're 10 or even 40:1. You're way in excess of these inflammatory oils. But it's possible to eat so few of them and so much fish and butter and all the other good stuff that you can get your omega-6 oils down really low. And most people eating a moderate amount of seeds, it's going to be perfect. But a lot of people, when they go in a healthy lifestyle, like, oh, seeds are good. Like, let me put some hemp protein in here, let me put some sunflower stuff in here, and let me eat this big handful of seeds. And that can be excessive. So in moderation, assuming that those seeds work for you, I think seeds are just fine. But usually they're used in excess. When I was a raw vegan, like, well, let's see, I can soak like a bucket of seeds this big and I can cram it all into my blender and it's gonna taste like pudding and like really good stuff. No, it's some maple syrup that's raw, it's some agave, and man, it's almost like I'm drinking a shake. Well, I am drinking a shake, but
Heather, I've actually read the Better Baby book as well. I was waiting for the other book to come out. My wife and I just turned 1 year old.
oh, congratulations.
Yeah. But I couldn't wait for your book to come out, so I started reading that, and a lot of it I hope kind of transfers over.
Yeah, there's some similarities.
Yeah, and bought a few and given them to friends that are pregnant too. But my main question tonight was the Unfair Advantage product. I've been taking that since you brought it out, and I'm just wondering how, like, what the effects are supposed to be coming in from that, and does it take a while to maximize from it?
How old are you?
I'm 31.
31, okay, cool. Unfair Advantage is a new product, and it's, in my opinion, the most important product that I've made, even probably more important from an innovation perspective anyway than Bulletproof Coffee, which is pretty darn important in terms of my day. I wouldn't want to swap them out, by the way. Unfair Advantage is a new form of a compound called PQQ, and PQQ is part of the Krebs cycle that makes your mitochondrial energy, makes ATP. So this is the equivalent of photosynthesis in humans. Like, it's how we make energy. We take oxygen and we take glucose or ketones, and we crunch them together and make energy. So what Unfair Advantage does is it goes in, it's a colloidal form, which means it can absorb easily, and it's an activated form, which means it's not the type of PQQ that is commonly available on the market. It's one we synthesize. And that means it doesn't get precipitated out in the body like most of like all of the stuff you can buy today. And when most people take it, they feel something up here, the prefrontal cortex, which has the most mitochondrial density in the body. And then they feel it here, which is the heart, which has the second most dense mitochondria. And then a few minutes later, they feel it in their body. I would say 9 out of 10 people feel it when they take it within 10, 20 minutes. And of those, most of them feel it here first. A few people feel it in their cardiac system first. And a few people, especially people 25 and younger, they don't necessarily feel it. But here's what it does. Number one, it makes your creation of ATP more efficient. So for about 6 to 8 hours, about 10,000 redox cycles it's called, you actually make ATP more efficiently. This is the equivalent of going to your car and adding a bottle of that octane booster to your gas tank. Going like, wow, like the engine runs better. But the real thing, the reason I think it's so important, is that PQQ in multiple studies increases the number of mitochondria, which is fascinating research. So if you wanted to have an engine in your car that ran better and actually have 2 engines in your car later, this would be the way to do it. So I do like 4 of those a day, and I'm planning to do that for a long time. And when you look at aging from a mitochondrial perspective, there are all sorts of bad things that happen in the body as your mitochondrial function goes down. In my own case, having been exposed to toxic mold multiple times in where I was living, toxic mold flattens your inner mitochondrial membrane and reduces mitochondrial efficiency. So I was dealing with mitochondrial damage. And some of the practices that I recommend in the book, like high intensity interval training, like intermittent fasting, like cold thermogenesis, some use, which is in the book, some uses of lasers can actually drive you to make new mitochondria or catalyze the synthesis of ATP. And in this case now, unfair advantage, these are ways you can actually like take charge of the core energy in your body. And when you want to have more willpower, you want to have more energy, you want to have more focus, having more mitochondria or better functioning mitochondria, they're the foundational thing about who you are. You have about, if you stopped making ATP in your body right now, you'd die in about 6 seconds. You have a 6-second reserve of ATP because you make it so rapidly and you're recycling it all the time. So it's a critical thing, and a small change in the efficiency there equals big changes in how you feel.
What does more mitochondria mean? Like, aren't they in your cells? Does that just mean more cells, or does it mean bigger mitochondria, more active mitochondria? What does that mean?
More mitochondria, what does it mean? It actually increases the number of mitochondria. And the big variables for mitochondria are the size of the mitochondria. You get bigger mitochondria. You can also change the shape of a mitochondria. Like they can be round or they can be like rod shaped, and some shapes are more efficient than others. And I don't remember which shapes are more efficient than others, but I know that when we're looking at mitochondrial efficiency, shape is one of the variables that we look at. And more means the number. So we stole mitochondria or maybe borrowed them from bacteria. So all bacteria have PQQ in them, and they use this essentially as part of their mitochondrial activity. And our mitochondria are very, very similar to the ones that bacteria use. And you can have more than one mitochondria in a cell. In fact, it's very common that cells have more than one. So if you were going to have 4 in that cell, maybe you got 5, right? And that's what more mitochondria means. But you'll also see changes in the efficiency and likely the size, but I don't have a study that I know of that says that the compound PQQ changes the size or shape. But I know that it's changed the number of mitochondria and it's changed the efficiency of mitochondria.
Here.
Is there an ideal time to take unfair advantage?
The best time to take unfair advantage? It depends on you. If you have a hard time going to sleep, not at bedtime, but if you go to sleep well, then you should take it at bedtime. And the reason for that is that we have this cool system in the brain. As part of the research for the book, I really dug in on the drivers for the glymphatic system. And the glymphatic system pumps cerebrospinal fluid into your brain, where it washes your brain cells, and it removes some of the toxic brain proteins that form during the day when you're awake. In fact, there's a theory that one of the reasons that we sleep is in order to enable this cycle. So it's basically the cleaning cycle. Use the brain all day, wash it all night. And this is driven, and I found the study, referenced it in the book. I think I referenced it in the book, but I know I found the study anyway. But whether it has a little number on there, I don't remember that. And that is, it's a mitochondrial driven process. So if you increase your mitochondrial efficiency while you're sleeping, you'll pump the fluid in and out faster, you clean your brain faster, and you wake up feeling better in less time.
So would you take 4 iron pills before bed?
I don't, I spread them out, because I like to feel really good during the day. So I take 1 in the morning, and if I'm like tired after a big day, I'll take 2 in the morning, and take 1 at night, and I take 1 that's like in my bag, like when I'm traveling around. So when I was in like New York and LA, like going on these crazy TV shows, for the Bulletproof Diet Book launch, but I probably had 6 of them. I was like, whenever I thought about it, I would open the container up and I'd give it to whatever like TV people were near me, and then I would take 1 too. So that's like an extreme performance time where you just have to be on all the time. Today I had 2 when I woke up and I had 1 at lunch. And I was like, okay, I give 1 to a friend and I took 1. So I've only had 3 today, and I'll take 1 at bedtime.
What use of red light for mitochondrial?
Use of red light for mitochondrial function. When we remodeled our bathrooms, I had the electrician put in a red light in the shower, which is really cool. So if you take a shower at night, or you just get up at night, you only have red light, which doesn't mess with your sleep cycle at all. And it turns out that bracketing your cortisol with red light before bed and in the morning is a really good idea. But you can get highly intense red LEDs, or even red lasers, and they will drive, depending on the wavelength, about a 75% increase in the efficiency of ATP recycling, and they can actually drive the creation of new mitochondria, particularly in the brain. You can do this with red and infrared. The advantage of red light is that it also causes collagen synthesis. So if you're working on wrinkles and all, there's a really cheap way to get the wrinkle and some of the mitochondrial effects. Given that we live in British Columbia, I've heard there's an industry here that involves growing some things that you're not supposed to grow. And they make these special lights at these like hydroponic places, which where people like to grow broccoli in their living rooms. And you buy these bright red banks of LED lights for like $25. It's the same wavelength that drives collagen synthesis and ATP. And so I have a 16 by 16 inch panel that I ordered for $40 off Amazon, and you can actually put it like over your gut, and that's not. These are bright lights; they like shine into your body, and it's a way to help with wrinkles, help with ATP, and if you're not shining at your skin and you shine at your broccoli, that's good for you too.
I just have a question. I'm not really an average coffee drinker.
I'm so sorry.
It's okay. It's not your fault. Actually, like, because I get really jittery from other brands, but hearing about your brand and your products, I just had to try it.
Mm-hmm.
But I still get the jitters.
You are one of the caffeine metabolizing people, and there are some people who have a genetic thing where they metabolize it. Do you get the same thing from tea?
No, actually, I don't.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So then in tea, there are some other compounds, theanine probably, that calms you down. So one thing you could do if you want coffee is you could take theanine, the amino acid, you can get that downstairs. You can take it with coffee and it'll even that out for you. But the other thing you could do is, what does chocolate do to you?
Oh, I love chocolate.
Okay,
But
you don't get jitters from that.
too much of it, I'm like, yeah, the jitters, same thing.
Okay, so chocolate has the caffeine, it has some other stimulants in it as well, like theophylline and whatnot. So what you want to do is find a strong source of polyphenols. And one of the really cool things that came out as I was doing the research, I have this weird scientific process that I do where it's like you observe something and then you ask why and then you form a hypothesis and see if it's plausible. And it's totally backwards because everyone knows science starts by go to the internet and see if it's real. And there's no evidence it didn't happen and it can't be real, therefore it isn't. And so when I kept losing weight, when I was trying to gain weight on Bulletproof Coffee, I'm like, there must be reasons, and there's like 8 of them in the book. But one of the interesting ones is about the gut biome. And we have these fat people bacteria, and these are the Firmicutes family. And fat people have more of those bacteria than thin people, and thin people have more Bacteroidetes. And you can't buy Bacteroidetes. You could about 10 years ago, and the company that made them was in Vancouver, and they went out of business. So no one sells these, and they're hard to grow and all that stuff. So the way you get Bacteroidetes is you feed them polyphenols, because that's what they eat. So when you eat lots of colored vegetables, or chocolate, or to some extent tea, and to a larger extent coffee, you are fueling your thin people bacteria. And what Bulletproof Coffee does when you make it with all the right ingredients is really cool. There's no fuel in it for bacteria. Most bacteria don't do well on fat. In fact, fat suppresses bacteria. And brain octane oil in particular makes life rough on those mean little microbes that are trying to make you fat. And then if you're mean to all the microbes, but then you feed the ones you want at the same time, guess what happens? You can express more, basically that you give an unfair advantage to the thin people bacteria in your gut. So what you can do then is you can get your source of polyphenols, which would be, in your case, tea of some sort, and then you add the butter and you add the brain octane. Another really recipe I really like when it's in the book is what I call the unlatte, the vanilla unlatte. Vanilla is an amazing source of polyphenols. It was originally like a medical herb that was used for all sorts of things like thousands of years ago, and it just became a flavoring herb. It was actually rumored to be an aphrodisiac. And I don't know if rumored, but that's what they used to use it for, as well as other stuff. But what I've found, especially when I'm doing like the 40 years of Zen style brain training, when you don't consume any caffeine because of what it does to alpha brainwaves in very advanced states, is that I'll take 2 full teaspoons of the Bulletproof Vanilla Max, and that's a lot of polyphenols. And it's also a lot of the compound of vanilla that activates vanilloid receptors in the brain. And you probably haven't heard of vanilloid receptors, but they're named after vanilla. And the number one thing that we eat that affects vanilloid receptors is capsaicin, or hot peppers, which you can take because of what they do for those receptors to reduce the pain signaling compounds. So you've probably heard of using like cayenne for arthritis potentially, and it's because of what it does to the vanilloid receptors. Vanilla has a similar effect. So you get the polyphenols and you get the effect on vanilloid receptors just by going with vanilla. I can feel a difference in my clarity, my focus. It's not at all like a coffee feeling, but you might enjoy the way that makes you feel, and that will let you totally bypass your jitters.
I love your vanilla, by the way.
Oh, thank you. There you go. So the vanilla works for you.
Yeah.
I see a question in the back.
Sorry, can I just expand on that question? I'm really sensitive to the coffee and green tea and like any
All
sort of
caffeine,
like,
okay.
caffeine, yeah. So what was that supplement that you,
It's called Vanilla Max, and what it is it's
sorry, the other one that you mentioned at the
Theanine.
beginning
oh,
of the
theanine, yeah.
Oh, okay.
So L-theanine is the amino acid in green tea, and it's a relaxing, calming one. And if you're sensitive to soda, tea, coffee, and chocolate, you probably, if you did a 23andMe test, you'd probably find that, okay, I have the genetic SNP that says that I don't handle caffeine very well. You're a slow caffeine metabolizer, or you could have some other nervous system thing that makes it so that just doesn't work for you. And in that case, theanine might even be helpful without the caffeine. THEANINE.
I was reading about xylitol having an impact on your gut flora. Can you comment on that?
The question about xylitol and the gut flora. There are some people who have something called SIBO, small intestine bacteria overgrowth, and something that I certainly had quite badly a long time ago. And there are questions about whether is xylitol what's called a FODMAP, which is, actually not remembering what it stands for, but essentially these are things like oligosaccharides that can be fermented in the gut that could feed bacteria that are growing in the wrong part of the gut. So there are some people for whom xylitol isn't a good choice. For the vast majority of people though, like there are studies that show 20 or more grams reduces osteoporosis, it stops cavities, it stops ear infections, and generally I consider it to be one of the healthier sweeteners out there. But if you have specific conditions, I mean, you shouldn't have it, then you shouldn't have it. For healthy people, it doesn't appear to have any negative impact on gut flora. But I would caution you with your xylitol. There's corn xylitol, there's American corn xylitol, and American corn is crap, in case you guys didn't know. There's Chinese corn xylitol, which is probably made from American corn, and then processed in China, and that will make you crap, like serious disaster. And then there's North American hardwood, which is actually mostly Canadian, and that is the only kind of xylitol that you want to have. Don't mess with corn xylitol. Erythritol is another sweetener that's allowed on the Bulletproof diet, and these are the 2 sugar alcohols that don't have all the negative effects of maltitol and sorbitol. And erythritol, it is made from corn. It's only made from corn, but you can get it from non-GMO corn, and I've never had a bad experience with that like I have with corn-based xylitol. In the very back.
A little bit less sciencey of a question. I was wondering if you've worked with any cafes to bring the Bulletproof recipe like to the public at a cafe setting.
Have I worked with cafes to bring Bulletproof recipes out? I'm opening the first Bulletproof coffee shop in Santa Monica in about 2 months. It's right underneath Arnold Schwarzenegger's office. It's 2 blocks from Gold's Gym, and it has a full kitchen. So we just figured that all out, and so I will have a selection of some of the recipes from the book, and I'll have Bulletproof coffee there, of course, and some various other menu items. It is far away, and there are some other cafes. There's a store finder actually on the Bulletproof website where you can find places that make Bulletproof coffee using the right beans, the right oil, and the right butter.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And I believe there's 56 places like that right now. So we work with people to make it available. I went on this TV show that I've never seen called Home and Family, which is popular during the day. And it's put on by Hallmark. And I'm sitting there and there's like these famous people and then there's me. And one of them is like Richie Sambora from Bon Jovi. And there's this lady there. And the host says, and there's this guy who puts butter in coffee. And the lady goes, "Are you serious? He's here?" And she turns like, "Which one are you?" It turns out this lady is Kim Douglas, who's Ellen DeGeneres' beauty expert. She goes, Dave, I have your coffee every single morning, and I love it, and it's changed my life, and I love it. And I'm like, did this just happen? And I was so grateful, because like she's seeing this on national TV.
Yeah.
And she was getting it at one of the cafes called Erewhon in Santa Monica that makes it using the right ingredients. So you can definitely get it, and I work with cafes to do it. And if I find a cafe that says, you know, we're mixing margarine and Sega and it's bulletproof, then I correct them that they're welcome to make butter coffee, but that the stuff in the book, I published the numbers about performance on moldy coffee versus not moldy coffee. That's legit research. It's so real. And the same thing with using brain octane versus coconut oil. There's an 18 times benefit that you get. Coconut oil is good for you. It's a good source of lauric acid. It's a cheap source of lauric acid. But lauric acid isn't really a medium chain triglyceride, despite what the coconut oil marketing companies will tell you. I've already answered one of your questions, so I'll answer more if you're the only hand up. But if there's another one, sorry. In the back.
One quick question. Actually, two questions. So, will more of your products actually be coming to Canada? And the second part is your unfair advantage. Is that something that's actually comparable to modafinil, which I've heard you use in your iPodcast a couple times?
Unfair advantage is unrelated to modafinil. And I like to make stuff that you can stack, because they work on different mechanisms. So there's pathways, and sometimes you do 5 things to the same pathway, you're not going to get 5 times the benefit. So one of the products I make, like choline force, that thing helps with acetylcholine, and there's lots of ways to increase acetylcholine. Like this is a formula that's been around for 20 years, not my formula, but this idea has been around, and there's companies that sell, you know, the same kind of ingredients, the same effects for twice the amount. Like this is, in my mind, like something that's well understood, and it's something that helps 50, 60% of people. They benefit from more acetylcholine. Other people just get a headache and jaw tension, right? Your mileage may vary. Unfair advantage is beneficial for everyone that I've ever come across, but some people feel it very strongly, and some people it's more of a preventative thing. But these are unrelated pathways. And then there's GABA wave, which is one that I think we're close to having certified in Canada. And GABA wave is one that, for a great number of people, huge focus during the day and amazingly deep sleep at night. You just take it once in the morning, and you take it every other day. If you've ever had GABA wave, the technical term for how it tastes is it tastes like ass. And I apologize for that rude term. But I'm reformulating it to make it taste like cherries. So, whenever I can, I'm getting these things certified. So the vast majority of Bulletproof products have received Health Canada approval when they require Health Canada approval. So I'm working really hard on that, and you guys have no idea. The Canadian market is 10% of the size of the American market, and it is far more expensive and difficult to get a product approved here than it is down there. So I'm doing it because I live here, and because like you're my neighbors. But from a business perspective, it's actually a bad idea. I shouldn't do it, but I'm doing it anyway because it's only fair. And I wish that. Now, having lived up here for almost 5 years now and working on my permanent residency and citizenship, I really wish that it was a little easier to get some of these supplements up here. For that matter, I wish it was easier to order socks from the U.S. and get them to arrive here. That's a whole other Yeah?
Do you know if the Bulletproof Diet can help people with dyslexia?
Can the Bulletproof Diet help people with dyslexia? It depends on where your dyslexia comes from, but if it's a brain energy thing, almost certainly. If it is a biochemical problem, almost certainly. However, there are other things you might want to do for dyslexia. For instance, these glasses are custom tinted for my eyes. I don't have dyslexia. However, the way my eyes work, I almost certainly should have had dyslexia. And the way my brain works. In fact, I had the symptoms of Asperger's and certainly was diagnosed with ADD, and I had a bunch of other weird stuff like that when I was younger before I hacked my brain and my biology. So it turns out that when you get the right color for your eyes, and you put on either the glasses or you put on a colored sheet over your paper, the letters stop moving themselves around and you can read. The lady who's done this work has been on my podcast. Her name is Helen Irlen, I-R-L-E-N. I saw her at the Bulletproof party in LA this weekend. She spent 35 years working with dyslexic adults and kids, as well as kids with autism and ADD. And 48% of people are made weak by certain spectrums of light, especially fluorescent lights. Fluorescent lights mess me up. I wear these. My brain works all day long. So you might consider that you're wearing a hat. It's no accident you're wearing a hat. It's because light pisses your eyes off, and you just naturally wear a hat.
It's her.
You could just be you could just be a fan of the San Francisco, whatever. That's great too. So yeah, it can help dramatically, but you need to train your eyes. And I write about biohacking a lot. I've done extensive vision training to teach my eyes to work better together. And you can use computers, and you can use some basic exercises. You should get a book called Yoga for Your Eyes by Meyer Schneier. His video is absolutely terrible, but it might be useful because it shows you things. It just makes me go, oh, can you do that? And also a guy named Eric Cobb at Z Health, who's a friend of mine, has the best vision training system that I've come across, and I'd recommend you check him out. So Z Health, I think it's called the Vision Gym, if I remember right. Some of the exercises are stupid, but they'll make you so tired and cranky because they stress your brain, but they'll make your eyes work better. So you can totally hack your vision. I went from like 20/60 in both eyes and with an astigmatism. In 3 months, I went back to 20/20 in both eyes just from doing training for an hour a week. It's like, and that was after having LASIK 10 years before that. So you totally have a lot of control that you don't know you have.
Yeah, that's so interesting. It's funny with the fluorescent light because we had one in our house, and every time we turn it on, I just feel like a hissy fit.
As well you should. In fact, I would suggest this for all of you. Get rid of those damn things. If you break a fluorescent light, it releases mercury gas. And I've taught my kids, if someone breaks a fluorescent light, run. Like, don't even breathe. Just run out of the room. Because if you breathe that stuff, it goes into your body, and it can mess you up. There's even a case of one poor 18-month-old who had a curly light broken in his room, and his parents put the shards in the trash can in his room, and he woke up the next morning and his brain didn't work very well, and he actually developed autism. I don't believe that mercury causes autism. I believe that autoimmune neuroinflammation causes autism, and that mercury can be a contributing factor to autoimmune neuroinflammation. So stay the hell away from it. It's bad for you, and don't allow it in your house. Because there are studies that show fluorescent lights make people sick more often, they reduce cognitive function. So why would you put like a subtle form of kryptonite to light up your kitchen? Like, whose idea was that? Oh, by the way, you can only buy those lights from China. You can't even make them in North America. So why are we doing this? Question over here?
Yeah, so how would this affect anyone that has epilepsy?
How would the Bulletproof Diet affect people with epilepsy? I don't know if I've ever said this, but my mom had epilepsy. She had epilepsy my whole life. She was taking high-dose Dilantin. And there are massive studies about the ketosis, the state of ketosis and ketosis diets for people with epilepsy, and the effects can be profound. In fact, it's pretty likely, I was never formally diagnosed with this, but it's pretty likely that I actually have silent migraines, which are towards the direction of epilepsy. Like people have migraines, people have epilepsy, they come together very frequently. And there's some theories that essentially like they're part of the same spectrum of conditions. It's just at some point you get an outright seizure, at other points you just have this, pain and whatnot. I don't typically get migraines anymore. I might if I've eaten the wrong foods and I'm under bright fluorescent lights for a long period of time, I might get a migraine. But when you're dealing with epilepsy, just being in ketosis can change your entire life. And the question there is, if you're in ketosis, how long or how often do you cycle out of ketosis before you're going to have a problem again? Because there are people who love being in ketosis forever, men and women, although it's typically harder for women. But my experience is that most people do best in the long term if they're in ketosis for a while and they come out and they go back in. But if every time you come out you have seizures, then maybe you want to stay in ketosis for a long time. There's also a food allergy component to pay attention to, and there's also neurofeedback, which can have profound effects on epilepsy. You can teach your brain when it's doing that, and it can learn to not do it, depending on the source of it. My mother ended up having Stanford-based surgery on her brain. They did some pretty heavy-duty work on it, and she has some results from the surgery. But I believe that with proper training of the brain and proper nutrition, you can reduce a lot of epilepsy, but I'm not a doctor, and you know, not allowed to prescribe anything, and that's not what I do. But I would say try finding your kryptonite, because some of those suspect foods, and maybe even eggs, may be the root trigger for you. All right, let's check what time it is, because I want to make sure I sign some books for people. We'll do one more question, we'll go down and start signing books. All right.
3 ways to kick more ass.
You said 3 ways to kick more ass?
Or 3 recommendations.
3 recommendations to kick more
We're
ass.
always asking kids.
Great question. Let's see. The first one is free, and it's the simplest one, and it's just gratitude. And practicing conscious gratitude is such an easy thing to do, and it's what I do with my kids. Like every night, and I'll do it tonight, assuming that they're still awake when I get home, is, you know, Alan's 5, and it's like, all right, let's do gratitude, and then what they do is they find 3 things that they're grateful for today. And today, I guarantee you one of them is that we put lights on the Christmas tree. All right, I know he's going to say that. And the other 2, I have no idea, and sometimes they're kind of profound. The other day, Anna said, "I'm grateful for the Big Bang, because without it, there wouldn't be anything." And then I play it back for them too. I say, okay, well here's mine. You know, I'm grateful that I'm putting you to bed, or I'm grateful we had a good dinner, or I'm grateful that the Bulletproof Diet hit number 9 on the New York Times list, right? And that's, what's that? I'm like, it's good. So, but we do that, and doing that changes your brain, and it actually changes genetic expression. And if you do that when you wake up, you do it when you go to sleep, it's kind of hard to be a jerk all the time. You can still do it if you try really hard, but it's a way to kick more ass, and it changes things. And the simplest gratitude you can ever have is well, I'm glad I learned not to do that again. You can always be grateful for whatever the situation is with that phrase. And if you build that into everything you do, things get easier, and it requires less willpower, even if you've just amplified your willpower with Bulletproof Coffee, et cetera, et cetera. The second thing is avoid kryptonite, and that is hard. Use the Bulletproof Diet, use the Food Sense app, do whatever, get a blood allergy test. But it's not just things you're allergic to. Avoid toxic solvents, avoid fluorescent lights that are in your home. Avoid the things that make you weak, that don't add any value. And here's an interesting thought. If you like a social drink, it added value because it was social and fun and you liked the taste, but it also made you weak. But you knew it made you weak and you did it on purpose. That's okay, that's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is avoid the kryptonite that doesn't do anything for you, because it's just there like sucking things, and it doesn't give you fun. So at least like make the kryptonite count, would be number 2, right? Like do it consciously. And the third one, this will be kind of a little bit esoteric, but recognize that you are not your body. Like you inhabit your body, but if you take responsibility for what that Labrador in your head does and the impulses that it gives you, and you think they make you a bad person, it's because you haven't identified the part of your brains and your thoughts that are actually you versus the systems that are in place to make sure that you reproduce and that you don't get eaten by tigers. And if you feel like you're a bad person because something scary happened and you ran away, and you're like, well, if I had courage, I only would have been there. That's all crap. That's not how the body and mind work. And if you recognize that those things that are actually listed in the Buddhist hindrances, things like, negative thoughts about people, things like aggression, not self-defense, but aggression that's unwarranted, and a lot of the negative emotions, that those are coming from your body's desperate and futile and stupid attempts to keep you alive in a world that isn't threatening. If you can recognize that and lose the guilt over those, you can start training your body to do what you want it to do. And that is a huge gift. But for me, no one ever explained that emotions aren't supposed to be rational. That was something that I wish I had learned when I was young. So they just happen, and there isn't a reason. And if there is a reason, it's because the Labrador made them happen, not you. And then you can manage them as something that doesn't make you inherently a bad person. And you can apply that to your food, you can apply that to parenting, you can apply that to relationships or work, or just whether or not you flipped off the guy in the car in front of you. All of those things, it's there. On that note, I want to sign some books so I can be home in time for a late bedtime.